Okay, well, welcome everybody. My name is Wendy Nelson. I'm UAVSAR's Executive Director up here in Chicago, and happy that you can all join us for this great presentation from our friends at NASA to discuss the disasters program and their mapping portal. I'm going to take a moment to introduce you to Zan Fredericks, who's our Professional Education Committee Chair this year, and she can lay the groundwork and introduce you to our fine presenters today. So welcome all.
Thanks, Wendy, and welcome everyone to UAVSAR's first webinar of 2020. It's pretty exciting. Today we will be learning about the NASA Disasters Program and get a mapping portal overview from Jeremy Kirkendall, who's the Senior GIS Administrator, and Garrett Layne, who is a GIS Specialist for the NASA Disasters Program at NASA headquarters. They're responsible for the curation of the NASA Disasters Mapping Portal, which hosts disaster-relevant research, data, satellite imagery from across NASA, as well as web applications and story maps. Jeremy has 10 years of GIS experience and a master's in GIS Management, and Garrett has 5 years of GIS experience along with background in meteorology and remote sensing. Before we get started, I just want to encourage attendees to pose any of your questions throughout the webinar. You can do this by either using the Q&A or chat functions. And if you hover over the Zoom window, you'll see a taskbar pop up at the bottom of the screen. And with that, I'll let Jeremy and Garrett take it away.
Thank you, and thank you guys for having us. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them in the middle of the presentation. Garrett is monitoring the chat and the Q&A windows, and he will try to respond to them as he can. So we are going to talk briefly about the NASA Disasters Program, and then primarily the focus of the talk will be on the portal itself and the kind of products that you can find in it and how to use them. So NASA has a lot of satellites that are looking at the Earth. And while they may often be used for long-term climatological studies, we can also use them to look at short-term incidents such as a hurricane or an earthquake. The program does more than just response. We also do mitigation, recovery, preparing for events, but I'm going to focus primarily on the response side of things because that's where most of our GIS products are currently related to. And the goal of the program is to make NASA data available to everyone. This is not just a US-only thing. We have a global reach. We have helped out with a number of disasters in the Caribbean and the rest of South America, Southeast Asia. They're all very big locations for us. We want to interact with the people that would be using this data. So if anyone on the phone does use our data for an event, or if you're using it to monitor conditions from some of our near real-time products that are always updating, we'd love to know how you're using them, if you have feedback for how they could be more useful. The kind of feedback that you guys can give to us makes the products better and makes it easier for everyone else to use them too. So the portal is the home of all the geospatial data that NASA is producing in the disasters program. It used to be very difficult to find these products, so the portal was created to put everything into a uniform format. All the products have Esri REST endpoints, and a majority of the new ones also have WMS endpoints in case you're using open source software. Everything is free and openly available to anyone to use. There's no login requirements. There's no restrictions. If you're a commercial provider, you can use our data to do anything you want. Keeping in mind that our data is, they are research products. So we're not like FEMA in a sense of a hurricane is coming, we're going to make these same 3 products every time. We will look at the disaster, we'll look at who the end users are. Hopefully they have some questions so that we can narrow down what kind of products we should create. And then we have a general catalog of products that could be created. It'll also come down to is the data good? Are there satellite passes happening within a day or 2 of the event? If it's an optical sensor, can it see the ground or not, because there could be clouds in the way. So there's a few things that can change what kind of products get created for a different event. We're not operational like FEMA and NOAA are, so we don't work 24/7, but when there's a large event like the Puerto Rico earthquakes that just happened recently, we will put in some extra effort to try and get products posted. And then because we're a research agency, we also have some flexibility. We have the ability to take a question from an end user and try to create a new product on the spot. We'll show you guys a product a little later from Hurricane Dorian, where normally we would just show the rainfall happening over a short term, like 30 minutes, 1 hour, 1 day, or whatever. Well, we did a cumulative storm total, and it showed 4 feet of rain to really help visualize just how severe of a storm it was in terms of rainfall. So we have some flexibility depending on what the situation is. So I'm going to jump out of the slides and go into a live demo of the website. So we've got the portal here. Can you guys still see the page? Good? Okay. All right. So the portal homepage has the featured maps and apps section at the top. The story maps that are being highlighted here are usually the more recent and more notable disasters that we'd like to bring attention to. A little bit further down, we embed a story map that has our near real-time dashboard where the near real-time products are being highlighted. We'll get into them a little bit later. We have another tab that'll show you recent products if you just want to know, regardless of what the event is, what we've done recently. We have a tropical cyclone dashboard, which is kind of boring looking right now just because, fix that, just because there are no tropical cyclones at the moment, but this is a really good example of what you can do with NASA data. You can take a couple of NASA products, some NOAA products, your own information. So we've got the National Hurricane Center's active hurricanes. We could turn on radar from NOAA. We've got a soil moisture product in here. We've got some flood products, and you combine all of these kind of things to really get a situational awareness of what's going on. So we don't expect you to only use our data. We figure you're going to use a lot of other people's data, and a dashboard is a great way to combine it. We also have a response locations dashboard here that'll show all the different places that we've responded to disasters. So we are a global program, but we have a focus on the US. And then you can see based on the different tiers, tier 0 is we've evaluated the event. We weren't really able to contribute anything to it. Maybe there wasn't a good satellite pass, or we just didn't have an end user. Tier 1 and tier 2 are the more severe events where we were able to contribute products. They may have been more prolonged, more effort put into them. Let's zoom in a little more. Yeah. There we go, that's better. And then we also break it down with a list of the responses and over time. So you can see going to different parts of the world, how we have a peak around hurricane season and also in the spring floods, depending on where you're looking. But going a little further down here, we have the disaster types. If you're looking for a previous event, and if you're looking at what we've just done recently, here's the recent responses in chronological order. So we'll be adding a link to the Australia fires very shortly, and then Puerto Rico is the other most recent event we've been working on. So let's say we want to go look at tropical cyclones and see what kind of responses we've had. The page for the tropical cyclones is going to have the same dashboard as before, but it's been filtered to only show the tropical cyclone events. That'll help you figure out where we have looked at and where products may be available. And a little bit lower on the page are all the story maps for the tropical cyclones that we've responded to, along with product galleries. If we want to check out Hurricane Dorian, this is a story map, if you're not familiar with the Esri products. And the story maps are where we're trying to take the NASA products that we've created, combine them with other people's data, put a bit of a narrative to it, and try to show what is possible with our data. So we've got some imagery from the International Space Station here that show off the hurricane. We used synthetic aperture radar, the Sentinel-1 satellite, to figure out where there was flooding on the islands, on the Bahamas, while the storm was still happening. The optical image that you see here is from GOES. So it gives you a really good idea of we're in the middle of this really big hurricane. Satellites can't see through all these clouds, but radar satellites can. So we were able to use the data from that for the past that happened in the yellow box and determine exactly what areas appeared to be flooded. We can map out other things, such as just looking at optical imagery to see what the change in vegetation was after the hurricane went through. You can see on the right side, the island was very brown because of the strong winds just ripping all the vegetation off. We create products that will show a difference in nighttime lights, which could be related to power outages from the storms. So we've got before and after, and you can see a pretty drastic difference in the amount of lights visible. Here's the rainfall product I was talking about, where we took all of the global precipitation measurements, satellite data, and mapped out where the heaviest rainfall was over the 2 days that it had fallen. Some of our most popular products are the damage and flood proxy maps. These are also created from radar satellites. So we'll usually use Copernicus, Sentinel-1, JAXA ALOS II sometimes, and there's been a few instances of some of the other ones that we've used. But we've also got NASA and the Indian Space Agency launching the NISAR satellite in, I believe, 2021-ish, which is another radar satellite. And once that launches, we'll be able to have even more overpasses of radar satellites. So Sentinel-1 typically goes over an area about every 6 days or so, and it all comes down to how quickly does the satellite pass over the area after the disaster happens for how useful some of these products are. So we had a couple of good passes with this storm. You can see some areas in here that were likely damaged. We've mapped out using the OpenStreetMap infrastructure layers. Gas stations, we've got some hospitals, there's a power substation. And what you can do with the damage proxy map is you can quickly look at large-scale areas that have been impacted, or maybe very rural areas that were impacted by an event, and you can get an idea of where do I need to allocate my resources? What is a critical asset of mine that may have been impacted? This hospital may have sustained some damage. Yellow is some moderate change has been detected. Orange is more, and then red is the most. So that would be worth checking out. And then there's a power substation over here that had a lot of damage shown around here. So this is definitely worth looking into. One thing to keep in mind is the resolution of the product. So the resolution of this product is 30 meters. So change that is smaller than 30 meters isn't going to be detected. And that includes change that is internal to a building. Satellites can't see inside of the building, so if you have an earthquake and you have structural damage inside of it, we wouldn't be able to pick that up. On the other side here, we have the flood proxy map, and it is going to help show where we have picked up floodwaters. And I know for a fact that the runway was submerged underwater for quite a while after the storm had happened, and it picked it up really well. Of course, it didn't cover the entire islands. This portion of the Bahamas was not covered by the satellite pass. So there are some limitations in terms of using satellite data, but this was a very useful product for getting a quick overview of areas that needed to be investigated. Let's go back to the homepage of the portal. So we've got other different event types here. I'm going to click on the Puerto Rico link over here. These links go straight to the product gallery. The product gallery is where the products themselves are located for any event. If you want to try to understand the products better, the story map is great for that. But the product gallery is where the GIS people are going to want to go. They're going to want to go to it and see what are the products that I can use from this event and bring it into my own map. In every story map, we will always link the product gallery so that you can easily find it. But then if you wanted to, say, check out the ARIA damage proxy map that was created for this one, you just click on the link. And for those that are familiar with ArcGIS Online, it looks pretty much the same. We're running an enterprise portal here. So we've got our metadata that's showing the date the image was taken. If it's something we're capturing a lot of, we'll list when we might be getting the next image, a summary that kind of explains what it is, suggested use. The damage proxy map is showing surface change with yellow to red, indicating more significant change due to the recent earthquakes. So we'll try to explain how you should use the product. The satellite sensor, for those that are concerned with what kind of instrument is being used, resolution is always important to know, and then credits for who created it. In case you would like to talk to them more, you can always reach out to us. We'll put you in contact with the scientists behind it. If you're trying to bring the data into your own maps or ArcMap, if you're trying to use Pro, any of those, all you want is the REST URL. So this REST endpoint right here, or if you're using open source, the WMS address. You just grab those and you can use the data in your own environment. If you want to look at it just in a basic map viewer, you can just use the map viewer there to check it out. Let's check out a couple of the products we made for Puerto Rico. We made a couple of damage proxy maps for it, and this is the Costa Sur power plant, which appeared to be damaged according to some news reports. And I've got the swipe tool here so you can see this whole area is all related to the power plant, and it was likely a significant amount of damage that was sustained. So we'll try to highlight the more notable areas in a product when we're in the story maps. But you can see all around here, the earthquake was, they were centered out here. So there was a lot of damage that was detected in this area, not quite as much over in the other parts of the cities, a little bit more around there. For earthquakes, we can also map the surface displacement, and we brought it into a 3D map. Even though this is a 2D product, we brought it into 3D so that you can get a better feel for what kind of topography is likely changing. The area in red at the darkest color, it shifted downwards into the west about 5.5 inches. So if we go into 3D here, we can look and see it's relatively flat right along the coast. The mountains aren't until further up. And it's a relatively flat area around the harbor here. And going over to the one power plant again, you can see the ground shifted significantly in the area of the power plant. For this event in particular, we did have access to high-resolution imagery through some commercial providers. We're not allowed to share that imagery. So the one thing we can do is we can derive a product from it. And what we've got here are the outlines of landslides that were detected. And we brought it into 3D so that you can get a good feel for what part of the landscape really shifted. You can see part of a landslide had gone across the highway here. Overall, landslides were pretty minimal for this event. But I believe there was around 120 small ones that were found in the imagery. Let's go back to the home page again. And we'll check out the Australian fires. We've started to do some things for aerosols. So for those of you that may be doing things related to air quality indexes, if you're wondering about smoke from a wildfire, we have a satellite. The Terra satellite has the MISR instrument, which can measure cloud height. And in this instance, we've actually shown it in 3D The values are exaggerated 20 times so you can see the structure of the clouds a little better. But you can see the red hotspots here are the MODIS hotspots that are showing where all the fires likely were. And then the smoke coming out of it, the plumes have very different shapes depending on the landscape, the intensity of the fire. And the 2D image underneath is the data that was converted into 3D. So the darker colors represent the lower altitudes. You can see the lower smoke here rises a lot higher over here. And we're providing this data to Australia's Bureau of Meteorology so they can work and potentially refine their air quality models. We've done some other stuff with wildfires before. There was the Paradise Fire in California, and I'll grab the story map for that one. We had a couple of damage proxy maps created for this one, and we had ground truthing data with it. CAL FIRE did a survey of all the buildings that were damaged and provided it to us. And the damage proxy map was pretty accurate. This area was not likely going to be damaged based on our product, and CAL FIRE confirmed it. But as we learned, the radar doesn't do a very good job of penetrating heavy tree canopy. So some of these other areas that were burned were not picked up. Thankfully, the IceSAR satellite that'll be launching does have a slightly different kind of radar that is able to penetrate through that. We did map out some basic air pollution just in 2D for this one, and you can see the smoke plume heavily impacted San Francisco. And then one of our near real-time products that I'll cover soon is the evaporative stress index. Right before the wildfires happened, the entire state of California dried out. This is showing the 3 weeks leading up to the Paradise Fire, and the evaporative stress index is measuring how dry the plants are. So the more they dry out, the more fuel there is for a potential fire. Going back to the different types of events, you can see we have done some stuff for volcanoes, nothing really for industrial accidents so far. Landslides and severe weather have been pretty small. Floods are one of the other big ones. We have a lot of flooding events. We'll take a look at the flooding in the central US that happened earlier this year. A number of different products were created for it. We had some natural color and true color imagery, along with an extent of the normal water and flood water that was created from Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 products. In this story map, we'll do a good job of showcasing some of that. A few of our products can be very large. Most of them are rasters, so sometimes they do take a little while to draw. This is a product that is going to take a little bit longer just because it covers about 1/3 of the entire country. But once it does draw, you'll see the river shown here will be in blue because that's water that we're expecting, and then we showed floodwaters in red outside of it. So there's quite a bit of flooding that was picked up in this event. Using products such as natural color can be nice to try and pick out flooding, but we can create other products from different band combinations, such as the MNDWI product, which is going to help show not only where water is, but the ground saturation. So the natural color is a false color image on the right side here. The water is popping out really nicely as the blue color. But when we look at the areas around where the water is, you can see there's a very dark brown where it's very dry, and then there's a bit more of a yellow color as you get closer to the water. So those are areas that are saturated but not quite flooded. And that can be helpful to know because if the flooding were increasing, those saturated areas would likely be the next areas to flood. And then again, you can always go to the product gallery to grab these and bring them into your own environment. We go back one more time. We've got the near real-time products down here. So the difference between the two types of products is event-specific products are created when an event happens. It's created after an earthquake or in the middle of a hurricane or whatever. Near real-time products are going to be updating all the time. Some of them are updating every 30 minutes or every couple hours. Some are daily, one or two of them are weekly. And the nice thing about these products is that we're a smaller program and we're not able to respond to every disaster that happens. So if there is an event that is happening and impacting you, but we're not able to support it for some reason, you can still use the near real-time products to get information that may not have otherwise been available. I'm going to just talk about what all these different ones are, and then I have some PowerPoint slides that will show them already loaded and with a few different animations we want to highlight. The firm's active fire points contain the MODIS fire points that most people are familiar with, and then the VIIRS fire points, which are from a different satellite and sensor. So if you're wondering where there may be wildfires in some areas, especially more rural areas where there may be limited other assets that can monitor them, that can be a nice layer. And it is a global layer, so it's a little slow just because there's a lot of data being picked up, but it's very handy for monitoring that kind of stuff. The MODIS flood products are pretty popular, mainly the 1-day and 2-day observation products. So one observation means it's going to be 1 day's worth of imagery, and it's going to show where flooding was detected. But it's an optical satellite, so clouds can block the flooding. 2 observations means it's the last 2 days worth of flooding, so you could have flooding being shown that's 2 days old, but the advantage there is that it subtracts the clouds from the 2 different days worth of data, and you have usually less cloud cover from that. We have a landslide nowcast, which it won't help with earthquake caused landslides, but it will help with ones that are caused from heavy rains. So if you're in a mountainous area and you have a really heavy storm coming through, this is going to monitor what kind of terrain may be at risk of a landslide happening. It is not going to factor in recent burn scars, though. The model behind that can't do that yet. Our most popular product in here is probably the soil moisture products. We have one that's good for 10 centimeters and one that's good for the top 2 meters. They are for the continental US only, but we are working on adding some additional ones that can expand into the Caribbean. I'll show some demos of those products in just a minute. The global precipitation measurement products, you saw a similar product for this with the Bahamas earlier for Hurricane Dorian. If you're in the US, use the National Weather Service's radar. That's going to be a higher resolution and it's going to be updated more frequently. If you don't have radar, this is going to be a useful product for you. So areas that may be, if you don't have any kind of ground-based radar, you can use this. You can also use it if you want to create a visualization because the radar that we know of at least doesn't go back in time. These products are typically going to contain 7 to 30 days worth of data. So you are able to look at the last week or month worth of storms that may have gone through. For those that are outside the US, we do have the SMAP based soil moisture product, which is a 3-day composite. It's a bit of a low resolution product. So for some of the Caribbean islands, they're only going to be a handful of pixels. But for other areas such as the rest of South America, Africa, it can be a very useful product there. And then we've got the evaporative stress index that you saw earlier. So let's take a look at them and see them in action. So here's the firm's active fire points, and you'll see as it progresses each day, different points that are popping up. This was a decent sized fire that happened earlier last year in California. Here's the Global Precipitation Measurement Satellite, which can be handy if you want to track storms that are coming out from over the ocean before ground-based radar may have gotten to them. You can see a typhoon out here that was going to hit Japan coming. The landslide nowcast is tied to the same global precipitation measurement data. That's where the rainfall comes from and determines when there's an increased risk of landslide. So if you bring the two layers in together, you'll see a strong correlation between what they're showing. And this is updated every 3 hours with 30-minute windows that you can go between. The Modus flood product here has 1 day on the left. You can pick up some flooding, but there's a little piece of it missing in here from some clouds. When you bring in the 2-day average, you get rid of the clouds that were there and improved a few other areas as well. The SMAP-based soil moisture product is shown up top. And then the higher resolution 2-meter and 10-centimeter products are shown on the bottom here. These are very good for tracking things like if a drought is getting worse or better. If the drought is getting worse, you know you have a fire risk that could be increasing, or if you have very saturated soils and you know a storm is coming, you have a higher flood risk. We saw the evaporative stress index earlier, where it showed the vegetation drying out and the increased fire risk that happened around the Paradise Fire. This one is a weekly product though. The resolution is 5 kilometers, so it's pretty decent. And then one thing to keep in mind when you're using these products is we mentioned the resolution before. The timing of the satellites can be an issue. So we have on the left side an optical product captured by the Modus satellite. It's the Modus flood product, and it was captured the day the flooding was happening in California. On the right side is a much more high resolution radar-based product that was captured quite a few days later, because that was the first time that a satellite with radar had gone over that area. So the optical-based satellites are very nice because they cover the entire Earth every single day. They can see a lot, but the clouds got in the way. It hid some of the flooding. It wasn't as high of a resolution. The radar satellites are very nice, but they don't always work for every situation. But that's why it's important to have a mix of these assets so that we can take advantage of whichever instrument is the best for the situation. I mentioned the power outage products earlier. This is a HD product that can be created. It's going to be a couple days after an event happens, but it has a resolution that will show you power outages to city block level and can be very useful for post-event analysis. And then one other product we'd like to show really quick is when the California earthquakes happened, we were able to measure the surface displacement just like we did for Puerto Rico, but we took it a step further, and we're going to show the different kinds of products here. We've got the interferogram that's kind of difficult to discern. It has contours showing what the ground change looks like. Then we have this map that shows the changes on one side versus the other side, a little easier to understand. And then we converted this one into a 3D product that was exaggerated to show the difference, where you can see the ground is shifting up pretty steeply on this side. And then when we go underground, it's a more gradual shift on this side. And the Navy actually used the surface displacement maps for this one to figure out what kind of underground infrastructure of theirs could have been impacted, whether it's fiber optic cables or geothermal wells. If the ground shifts, you might have damage to all those kind of products. So that covers the majority of the different kind of products that we normally have here. The one thing that I want to let everybody know about is we're an enterprise portal, but we're also in ArcGIS Online. We have a collaboration established so that any of our products getting published in the portal do end up also in ArcGIS Online. If you go into ArcGIS Online and you search, NASA flood, name of whatever city that may have been impacted by a flood, or maybe the overall event, the state, whatever it is, you may find a product that was created for that event. You can also search in open data search engines as well. But of course, the best way to guarantee finding the products is to go to the portal, because they're always going to be grouped by the disaster. And if a disaster has happened and impacted you and you don't see any products from us, you can always reach out to us. So we've got the portal address here. And then the top email address is for GIS and support, any kind of portal questions you may have. If you have questions about a product in particular, how to use it, if you want to access the data and there's not a link to download it already, just send us an email that way. If you're just requesting support for the disaster in general, send an email to this address, and that'll put you in contact with the coordinators for the program. So with all that said, I'd like to open it up to questions, get feedback from you guys on what looks helpful, what you wish we could do, because we are constantly making changes to the program and the portal.
Fantastic. Well, for those of you tuning in after introductions, we've just been learning about the NASA Disasters Program and Mapping Portal from Jeremy Kirkendall and Garrett Layne. Remember to use the chat function at the bottom of the screen to pose your questions, or the Q&A. They've been doing a great job of getting back to us. It does look like there is an outstanding question from Dan. Is the MAPS Disasters NASA Gov website up and running? Dan, I was able to access it internally here at the USGS, so I'm not sure if it's a firewall issue. It looks like you tried your URL in 3 different browsers and they timed out, so I'm not sure what the challenge is. I did put the HTTPS in front of it, so maybe try that and see if that helps. Additionally, on the
I mean, I'm using it live right now in the demo, so it's working for us. If you're still having issues, send us an email, please, and we'll work with you to figure out what the issue is. So it's loading right now. And there's the email addresses again. Fantastic.
So yes, all of our attendees, please enter your questions and Q&A in the chat window. And I had a quick question about the NISAR. You said it's going to be launched in 2021 and it will be able to penetrate veg. Did you say that?
Yeah, so there's 2 types of radar. There's C-band and there's L-band. Right now, all the Sentinel satellites are C-band, and they don't penetrate a heavy tree canopy very well. But there is an L-band, at least one. JAXA's ALOS 2 is L-band, and then NISAR will be L-band as well. UAVSAR. And we also have, I'll show that really quick. We have the UAVSAR instrument, which is not satellite-based. It is mounted on a plane, and was flown for Hurricane Florence to monitor 10 of the rivers that were flooding. And we flew multiple days for that one, and we were able to watch the flooding change over time. So here's all the different flight paths from UAVSAR. And it's a little funky looking of a product, but the pink in here, once it reloads, there we go, that is the water being detected. Even though there may have been heavy tree canopy in some places, it was able to see through it pretty well.
That's fantastic. So do you guys also ever pull in the IceSat II data? Because I think that's a blue-green wavelength that might be able to penetrate.
IceSat or IceI. IceI is a commercial SAR satellite.
No, IceSat. It's that, I thought it was a blue-green wavelength satellite that just got launched in September of last year by NASA.
So IceSat is I don't remember the exact details. I believe it doesn't pass over very often, and it might be a lower resolution. We don't really utilize that one in the disasters program. It's more for just studying the ice around the world.
That makes sense.
I think it has a better use for long climatological type studies.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So what kind of resolution will the NICER have?
It'll be at least what Sentinel is, which is 30 meters.
Yeah.
One request that we get a lot of the time at NASA is people are always looking for high resolution optical imagery, and the highest resolution imagery that we really have access to is the Landsat satellites. It's a NASA and USGS partnership, and that's only, what, 15 meters?
30 meters is the main, and then the main resolution in the panchromatic band is 10.
10, yeah, 10 for panchromatic.
We also use Sentinel 2 occasionally, which does have some 10-meter bands as well.
But 10 meters is still something the size of a house. So we're not going to be able to pinpoint very small things, unfortunately. It's just the limit of what satellite-based remote sensing can do.
No, it makes perfect sense. I thought it was brilliant that you called out the fact that even on your damage assessments for infrastructure, you can't detect the change inside the building. So while the outside external structure may be intact, that doesn't mean the inside didn't get damaged from the earthquake or any other kind of hazard. So you're right. That kind of resolution makes perfect sense. We do have some additional questions coming in via the chat. Someone asked if the ground truthing data will be made available.
So you guys are the ones that provide us the ground truthing data. We generally don't get to visit these disaster sites in person. So what we're looking for is if you're out there doing a building survey that was either damaged or flooded, or maybe you delineated the flood boundaries for an event, you mapped out a burn scar of a wildfire, whatever. If we had participated in the event, it can be very helpful to have that kind of information because it will increase the accuracy of our products. The, let's see, the product that I showed for the California wildfires, that was a data set that CAL FIRE shared with us. So if someone was specifically looking for the ground truthing data for that event, they would have to reach out to CAL FIRE and ask for it. Generally, we don't get a lot of ground truthing data just because we're still developing a lot of relationships with the people that are using this kind of stuff. And the portal is only 2 years old. So we haven't had a lot of products out there for a long time. This is a pretty big deal having gotten this data set. And in the middle of the event, we're able to change the thresholds on what counted as damaged or not to improve the quality of the product, just because they had started sending us the data. So ground truthing data is very valuable for everyone.
Absolutely, that's amazing. An additional question is if there is any word on methane sensors and detection?
So I'm not sure about methane sensors. We can ask our scientists. If Raj wants to shoot me an email, then we can definitely ask around the program and see who can detect that. I know what we have typically looked at in the past has been aerosols such as the smoke plumes or sulfur dioxide. We've measured that before. So I'm not sure if there what satellites we have that can detect methane, but we can look into it for sure. There's a lot of data and instruments that we aren't necessarily utilizing yet. We're continuously adding new projects. We just funded 10 new grants last year to keep expanding the kind of work we can do.
That's great. And a follow-up question to that ground truthing was people were interested in, it looks like you just beat me to the punch, but for those of you listening to it and not seeing the chat go through, the question was, where do we reach out to share ground truthing data around events? And it's one of those email addresses that was shared, hq-disasters-gis@mail.nasa.gov. So thanks for sharing that, because again, oftentimes in storm response or hazard response situations, we are out there collecting ground control points. And if we know they would be of use to other people, it's good to get the information out there and save some resources. All right, any additional questions for Jeremy and Garrett while we have them? This is a fantastic overview of the NASA Disasters Program and also the mapping portal. I didn't realize these layers were out there. As the USGS, we've got lots of hazards response efforts ongoing, and it's great to see some quick access information that we'd be able to grab, especially since you guys have and are the authoritative source of these satellites. Because oftentimes we hear the FEMA response calls ongoing, especially when it comes to hurricanes and things like that. But having that repository is a one-stop shop is always that nice way of accessing it when you're having to come in on a weekend or something like that. I know lots of team members here, I'm based out of St. Petersburg, Florida, will probably take advantage of this.
And we do have partnerships with a number of the major federal agencies, including collaborations with their own GIS portals. So FEMA, the Army Geospatial Center, whenever we create products that can be of use to them, we're sharing them directly into their portal. So some of these products are already being utilized by FEMA and the National Guard on a pretty frequent basis.
That's fantastic. And it seemed like the credit information, you had the REST service, the WMS, things like that, and the credit information is there. So if we do want to add them to, say we have an event support map or something like that, it sounds like you encourage their dissemination. So this data that you've, your time and effort has gone into creating could be shared more largely. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, we want everyone to use the data. It is free and open for any kind of use. So the reason we throw the credits in there, what's being highlighted on the screen is this one happens to be a product that used Copernicus Sentinel-1 data. So they have a requirement when we use their data that the credits say contains modified Copernicus Sentinel-1 data. And then we also mention that the NASA JPL team are the ones that, the ARIA team are the ones behind the product. So there's different credits depending on what the product is and whatnot, but we encourage everyone to share the data, and please just mention whatever credits are listed with the metadata.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. It sounds great that you guys are willing and encouraging others to share the data that you've taken time to painstakingly, get collaborated and coordinated and compiled into one good area, and then also that you've already run some analysis on. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it seems like the damage proxy map is the one that people love the most, aside from the flood products. And like just the other day, the FDIC learned about the damage proxy map for the first time, and they were using a point layer of all their banks to figure out which ones may have been impacted in Puerto Rico, so they could reach out to the right people to let them know if they needed support or not in some way.
That's a fantastic use of this data. So again, we thank you guys so much for joining us today and sharing this information. I'm sure some of the attendees weren't aware that it's out there and available, and encouraging them to use it. And I for sure will take advantage of it and make sure I bookmark this site. Hopefully we get it up and running for everybody else. With that, I'll ask one last time for any additional questions before we let our panelists go today. But I want to say sincere thank you to both you, Jeremy and Garrett, for that great overview. It's a tool well timed as well with the earthquake ongoing, with the wildfires, and also we're coming quickly onto hurricane season for 2020. And I can just think of so many applications of these data.
You're very welcome.
Well, fantastic. Wendy, would you close us out by sharing what upcoming events we have on the URISA calendar?
Oh, absolutely. In a couple of weeks, we'll be out in Long Beach for the Cal GIS conference, and there are some wildfire presentations on the program, and a lot of other very important topics to take advantage of. So hopefully, we'll see some of you out there. I will also be at the Esri Fed GIS conference in Washington, D.C. That same time period. I'll have a booth, so please come on by and say hello. If you are interested in presenting on some of the great work you've been doing, and Jeremy and Garrett, please do the same. We have presentation proposals are being accepted for GIS Pro 2020 in Baltimore for another few weeks. So get those presentation proposals in, and hopefully we'll see you at GIS Pro 2020 in Baltimore. and at all of our GIS Leadership Academies this year. We'll be in Minneapolis, Portland, and St. Pete, Florida. So attendance is limited at all of those, so get your registrations in for your preferred location. And that's all I have. I want to thank Jeremy and Garrett and Zan for running the show. Fantastic, and we will go ahead and put this recording up on the web page and within the URISA Connect community. So we'll also post the PowerPoint as well. So thank you all for attending, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Wendy.